rain to immediate southern coastal parts, particularly towards the southeast. A lot of that is clearing away though as we go overnight, and so for many it's going to be a dry picture with some clear skies, but worth noting across Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, we are going to have some showers feeding in from the north, and with temperatures falling close to, if not a little bit below freezing, particularly in rural spots, that brings the risk of some frost and also some icy patches. The icy patches are going to be more of an issue across parts of northern Scotland where the showers are more frequent. And worth bearing in mind, these showers could bring some sleet or snow, particularly over any modest higher ground. Also some icy patches likely across parts of Northern Ireland too, especially towards the north where we have some showers feeding in. A few showers perhaps for northwest England and also around northern and western parts of Wales, but otherwise, once that rain in the southeast has cleared through, it is looking largely dry as we go through into tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, again, lots of fine weather on offer, plenty of sunshine, just a few showers to watch out for, particularly towards some northern and western coastal areas, but most places avoiding these. And yes, just a bit of cloud bubbling up through the afternoon, but generally a fine and often sunny picture. That being said, temperatures around average for the time of year, so still a bit of a chilly feel to things. Later on, we will have a system coming in from the west that's going to push through overnight into Friday and lying across southeastern parts as we go through Friday itself. Behind that though, a lot of dry weather following in, but it does look a bit cloudier than tomorrow, and so sunshine's going to be at a bit more of a premium into the weekend, and there will be a northwest-southeast split with northwestern parts seeing most of the wet and windy weather.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you're watching State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin, the show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority. On tonight's show, the latest bombshell figures have revealed the UK's population is set to reach breaking point. I will be revealing tonight the shocking details of this generation-defining catastrophe in just a moment. Meanwhile, I will be joined tonight by Melanie Phillips following the shady government review of its counter-extremism strategy. We'll be looking at the secret propaganda unit behind what's been going on in the news this week, which has targeted mainstream conservative voices. Labour wants you to believe that it holds the key to growth and deregulation, but can the party of bureaucracy ever be trusted to roll it back? Plus, as the government is set to pour hundreds of millions of pounds of your money into the World Health Organization, I'll be joined by one man tonight who has revealed the true scale of government funding to globalist institutions. That's State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Starts right now. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, columnist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and former Labour Party advisor Scarlett Maguire. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay. And don't forget to hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. Now it's time for the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Matt, thank you very much. The top stories. The Chancellor has backed the expansion of Heathrow Airport in a speech outlining her plans to boost economic growth. Rachel Reeves claims a new runway will connect the UK to the world and open up new opportunities, including creating 100,000 jobs. She also announced plans to create a European Silicon Valley by developing a so-called growth corridor between Oxford and Cambridge. But the Chancellor acknowledged the plans to grow the economy will not come without a fight. Sir Keir Starmer was challenged over the government's plans for growth at Prime Minister's questions. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch mainly focused on the Employment Rights Bill, repeatedly asking if it would be dropped because it fails his tests for delivering growth. She also accused Sir Keir of misleading the House.
It is business that creates growth. Our economy is built by entrepreneurs, risk takers, and the hard graft of working people. They know that you can't tax your way to growth. You can't borrow your way to growth. You can't legislate your way to growth. Other countries are serious about freeing business from red tape. President Trump is doing it in America. Argentina is taking a chainsaw to regulations. Even the EU is not going as far as this left-wing government. This bill will put us at the bottom of the pack. Add it to the jobs tax, the family business tax. It's no wonder wealth creators are fleeing Britain in droves.
The Prime Minister, in a reference to Liz Truss, warned Ms Badenoch that she'd become the next lettuce, claiming the Conservatives left the economy in a mess.
Mr. Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense. She knows, and anybody who understands anything about the bill or any employment law will know you can't start in the morning and go to the tribunal in the afternoon. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
And Donald Trump has signed the Laken Riley Act, the first legislation to get his signature since his return to the White House. The bill is named after a Georgia nursing student who was murdered last year by a Venezuelan man. It requires the detention of unauthorized immigrants accused of theft and violent crimes.
Under the law I'm signing today, the Department of Homeland Security will be required to detain all illegal aliens who have been arrested for theft, burglary, larceny, shoplifting, assaulting a police officer, murder, or any crime that results in death or serious injury. In addition, for the first time ever, this act gives state governments the ability to sue the federal government for immediate injunctive relief if any future administration ever again refuses to enforce the immigration laws of the United States.
Now it's back to State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, if you think that you've already been watching Britain's population explosion, then you haven't seen anything yet. New data from the Office for National Statistics, which was released yesterday, reveals that the UK's population, get this, is set to reach 72.5 million people by the year 2032. Not far away at all. Entirely fuelled by a 4.9 million increase in net migration, now the only driver of our population growth. That's an increase equivalent to more than 4 cities the size of Birmingham. By the year 2047, just 22 years from now, which really, again, isn't that long, not far away at all, our population will explode by 9 million people, equivalent to another London. The proportion of our population is now growing exponentially. By the time a 5-year-old today turns just 31 years of age, 1 in 3 people on these islands will have been born somewhere else. Let me say that again. By the year 2051, it's estimated 1 in 3 of every people on these islands will have been born somewhere else. And the thing about this radical shift in our makeup of the country is that while politicians claim that they want to get immigration down, 2/3 of members of parliament actually believe, according to new polling this week, that we should continue mass immigration to grow the economy. This transformation of our country, with its 1,000-year-plus history, was all done without a single person in the country actually voting for it. Who voted for mass uncontrolled immigration? It's a question I ask MPs all the time. I've yet to meet anybody who voted for this. But the simple truth is that politicians don't want to admit is that actually this policy can be changed. We can stop this if we want to. But very few people in Westminster really want to get their arms around this issue. For too long, politicians have pretended that the status quo is simply inevitable, but it isn't. We've seen time and time again that when there is a political will from our leaders, then there is a way. Look no further than the way that our authorities behaved during the COVID pandemic or during the aftermath of the Southport atrocities. The real reason that immigration is not coming down in any serious way, let's be honest, is because our leaders don't want to bring it down, nor does big business. It helps big business. It keeps the cost of labour low, it keeps their profits high. And they don't really care that you don't want mass immigration, so on and on we go with this extreme policy experiment that's making us poorer, not richer, and which, as recent research has shown, is also driving crime and undermining our social fabric. As ever, let me know your views tonight at gbnews.com/yoursay or hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But I'm joined tonight by top pollster and CEO and founder of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter. Martin, the mood music on immigration out there in the country is changing, is it not? I'm looking at polls. I'm seeing people becoming more sceptical. I'm seeing them becoming a little bit more negative about this experiment, because that's what it is. It's an experiment. Nobody really knows how this level of demographic change is going to go. And they seem to be, I think, becoming a little bit more opposed to mass immigration. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. We have this interesting poll from Ipsos that came out recently, which asked people, assume that there was a trade-off between reducing immigration and hurting the economy, which some economists might disagree with, but let's take that as their statement. And they asked people whether it was better to reduce immigration, even if it hurt the economy, or to do the reverse. And amongst the general public, figures were 62% were in favour of restricting immigration, with only 24% the other way. But then Ipsos...
So a majority of people out there in the country want to reduce it, and a majority of people in Parliament basically want to keep the status quo.
That was the other interesting thing that Ipsos did. They also surveyed MPs as well.
Right.
And on the MPs were the other way around. 49% of MPs were for keeping immigration high, and only 31% against. So it's a little bit of a difference in opinion between MPs and the public, a bit like we had with Brexit back in 2016, when most MPs were against it, but the public were in favour.
So essentially we've got this sort of elite minority that's more socially liberal, that's more pro-immigration, which is not representing the values and the voice of people out there in the country, the forgotten majority. Now, how does that find its expression politically? Because what we've also seen in the polls this past week, we've got Reform now again number 2 in the polls. We've had them actually number 1 in a recent poll as well. I mean, is it the immigration issue that's driving that change as well?
It's probably a number of factors, if we're honest, but immigration could certainly be one of the major ones. It probably was for Donald Trump's victory in the United States. So the issues there were immigration, the economy and inflation. We may see similar things in Britain as well. So we did a poll recently with Find Out Now, that just came out today, showing that only 5% of Britons think that Labour usually acts in the national interest.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's come out today?
That's come out today. And overall, the figures for Labour as a government are not great. That
that's being diplomatic.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to do a bit of polling myself. I mean, the numbers are abysmal. I mean, only 16% of people out there approve of Keir Starmer's performance, according to YouGov.
Yes, well, we like to take an average of the poll of polls, but even then, it is very bad that Keir Starmer's on minus 35%.
Minus 35. You know what I call that? I call that Prince Andrew territory. That's what minus 35 is.
Kemi Badenoch on minus 16, Nigel Farage on minus 9. Everybody is minus, but some are more minus than others.
So Kemi Badenoch minus 16. So she's actually seemingly not cutting through.
That's, slightly worse than it was.
So it's getting worse, her ratings are
Yes, it's getting worse. Whereas Reform are definitely on a tear in the polls, that they are up and Labour is down. So this month, for the first month ever, our monthly poll of polls has Reform ahead of the Conservatives, just by 1%, but ahead of the Conservatives, only 2% behind Labour. So it's a three-horse race at the moment. And an interesting nugget is if Reform were to gain another 3% just in the polls, then if there were a general election, Reform would be the largest party and Nigel Farage might be Prime Minister.
So, OK, just say that again. So Reform currently averaging, what, 25%?
24 we have.
24%. If they get another 3 points, if they get up to 27... and we were to have a general election, they emerge as the largest party.
Yes, so they'd probably have to do a coalition with the Conservatives. If they get another 3%, so 6% more than where they are now,
so
then 30%. They would have around 30%, 31, then they would have an absolute majority in the House of Commons. But again, this is still a little bit science fiction because there isn't going to be an election tomorrow because Labour certainly don't want to have one. But it's an incredible position for the country to be in just 6 months or so after the general election where Labour won a massive landslide.
Yeah, I mean, it is, Patrick, quite... I mean, this is unprecedented territory. It's only a few months on, Labour crashing and burning in the polls, Reform arguably as strong as the SDP were in the 80s. Immigration is at the heart of this, is it not?
Completely. And I think I've written before in The Spectator that the Conservative Party is in the position of Les Dawson's mother-in-law, gone but not forgiven. And that's going to stay in position for a long time. The betrayal on the scale of immigration for a party that had promised 4 times in a row to bring it down, and particularly the Boris
Tories
way.
we're talking about
the Tories. That is going to put them on the naughty step for a long time. But Labour, I think, is ebbing away even as we speak. And I was looking at some figures on the economy today. The YouGov asks a monthly question, who's got the best policy for the economy? And Labour was down at 18% now. So that's below 1 in 5 people. And even the Tories on that have just nicked into a bit of a lead. And I can see a modest Tory poll recovery on the back of a traditional Tory looking after business message, because I don't quite think Reform has got the economy nailed in terms of who is their main spokesman on the economy and whether their agenda is shrink the state, Thatcherism, or protect the working class.
I'd just throw another stat out, Scarlett, that I read today, exclusively GB News, undertaken by the Centre for Migration Control. Of the Boris wave migrants who have come into the country since 2021, lots of them obviously dependents, the wives, the children of workers, actually very few workers overall. According to the Centre for Migration Control, that's cost the British taxpayer £35 billion. Now, there is a sense out there in the country, I see it in the polling, I hear it in focus groups when I'm sitting with voters, we hear it from people watching this show, that it's the entire elite, the entire establishment, left and right, utterly out of touch with people on this issue of mass immigration.
Well, then I think you haven't been listening to Labour, is that what they've been saying for a very long time is that the problem with working visas is that actually we don't have the skills here and we need to have the skills. I mean, if you look...
But how could we ever develop the skills here if we're relying on cheap migrant labour?
No, if you let me finish. So if you look at a graph about engineers, right, we desperately need engineers. So what happened was that engineering apprenticeships went down and the visas given to engineers went up. We should be training engineers for ourselves. We should be training doctors. We should be training nurses. What is so terrible about this country is we're not skilling up our own people. And that's how it's got to change.
So here's a question then, right? And then just before I come back to Martin, when I look at the numbers that came out this week with the Office for National Statistics, the government's forecasters, why are they assuming that net migration for the next 10 years or so is going to be at least 350,000 a year? Because there's lots of folks watching this show who will say, hang on a minute, that's higher than it was before Brexit. So why is Labour not saying we're not comfortable with net migration being even at 350,000 a year?
Because what Labour is not going to do, which is exactly what the Tories do, is to start putting figures on, because we don't know. But what we have to do is we have to work on, we have to change it. And the only way of changing it is to actually stop relying on people outside this country to come in and do the work and to actually skill up our own people.
That's tinkering, isn't it? We're in a whole new ball game in terms of public opinion on mass immigration. Neither of the big two parties gets it. Perhaps even reform isn't being as radical.
I've just explained what we're going to do, and it's not tinkering.
Let's hear from the pollster, Martin. I mean, there is a sense, you know, I look at the numbers, you know, regularly, and of the people coming into the country, only 22% are coming in on worker visas. We know, based on data from the Office for Budget Responsibility, mass immigration is often making us poorer, not richer. I mean, are voters aware of this reality with migration? Are they aware that it's bringing costs as well as benefits?
Well, I think I'm sure many voters can see that low-skilled immigration, which we do have a lot at the moment, depresses the wages of the low-skilled, which can, you know, hurt many people in the country. And I think at the time of Brexit, that feeling was in the air, and there was possibly the understanding by many people who voted for Brexit that that was going to be reduced, but the Conservatives did not. They kept it on. In fact,
they broke their promise.
Immigration increased after Brexit. So there's that, in a way, explains why the two major parties are less popular at the moment.
But hold on, Matt. I've been trying to explain what we're doing. All you're doing is saying this is terrible, but it's going to happen. And I'm saying that actually we can do something about it.
We'll do it. Bring the numbers down. Anyway, thank you to Martin and my panel. After the break, I will be speaking to columnist, writer, author, thinker Melanie Phillips about how her name came up in an internal government propaganda unit which vilified her as, you guessed it, far right. Join me in a couple of minutes and we'll hear direct from Melanie Phillips. See you shortly.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Well, you know I like an auction.
Yes.
And I've bought some strange things at auction before. You have as well, haven't you, Eamon?
Yeah, well, Ellie would throw this in the bin that you're coming up with now.
How about this? Admiral Lord Nelson's hair.
No.
Cut. I mean, is this a bit spooky? Cut as he lay dying during the Battle of Trafalgar, so someone's gone, oh, we'll just have a little bit of that there. In 1805, is on sale in Jersey, and it's a little cup. How much would you pay for the hair?
No, nothing. It would go in the bin, straight in the bin.
What? Even what? Nelson? That's very disrespectful to the British culture and heritage.
I think it's disrespectful that he lay there dying and someone thought, we'll take a quick strip
Well,
of
maybe they just had. Maybe they thought, you know, because there's obviously the famous painting, isn't there, of the Battle of Trafalgar? Maybe they thought we'll give him a quick haircut, and then they kept their £15,000, 15 grand.
Where's the hair come from? What part of the body?
His head, Eamon.
Well, it could be his underarm. I don't know. You know, it depends.
Hold on, let me have a little look.
You would bid
very curly. I think it's his. I think it's his head. It's his head. What?
You would bid more for his head than say his underarm.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
Or anywhere else.
I would hope so. A little less whiffy there, the head hair. And there it is. And it's in a little pot.
No.
And the only way you can probably find out is if you DNA test it, I guess. It's definitely his.
Whoever pays for that is bonkers.
Well,
that's creepy.
I was seriously tempted to make a bid for a toupee, not for me, but as worn by John Wayne.
John Wayne's wig.
Yeah.
Why?
Wow.
Why?
Well, why I didn't get it was my wife said to me, that is not coming into the house.
Well, she's right.
She was
she's right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, this evening. Now, we've just been discussing the population explosion. A couple of you have written in to express your views. Dead right, Matt, says one of you. Our politicians always believe they know better than the constituents they represent. And somebody else says, why the hell are they doing this to our country, our people? They put taxes, council tax up to pay for immigration, and then it ends up costing us even more. Keep your views coming in. You can hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. Now, this is a story I've really wanted to be talking about all day. The government's internal review of counter-extremism, really important part of government, has put its bias on full display for all of us to see, including the idea, get this, that talking about two-tier policing is a far-right narrative and that discussing the rape gangs are an alleged problem, a grievance narrative that is used to inflame anti-Muslim sentiment. But this revelation has put the spotlight as well on what is called, you might not have heard about this, very important, the government's Research, Information and Communications Unit, otherwise known as RICU, which is essentially a propaganda arm within the Prevent Counterterrorism programme. And it's been shown that RICU has, among other things, vilified mainstream conservative voices, MPs even, training its staff with an essay from anti-racism, Labour-aligned campaign group Hope Not Hate, to target people like esteemed writer, best-selling author Douglas Murray, columnist Rod Liddell, and best-selling author, columnist Melanie Phillips. Now, what was clear from the Shawcross review of Prevent, which was undertaken recently, was that, as William Shawcross noted, it has become obsessed with the far right, despite the fact that Islamism, remember this, is responsible, I'm going to give you some important stats, for 94% of all deaths from terrorism in Britain since 1999, 88% of all injuries, 80% of police counter-terrorism work last year, and 75% of the workload in MI5. So let's get some perspective. That would be my view. Now, Times columnist and author Melanie Phillips, who was, of course, mentioned in some of that RICU work, joins me now. Melanie, has the state lost the plot?
I think Britain has lost this particular plot for a very long time. I mean, back in the mists of time, in 2006, I wrote my best-selling book, Londonistan, about the way in which I thought the entire British establishment was surrendering to Islamist supremacism. And it's all got a lot worse since then. And what we've seen from this lamentable Home Office report that you mentioned, and the activities of the RICU outfit, which was one of the inspirations or sources behind this report, is that the British establishment goes to enormous lengths to avoid facing up to the principal cause of terrorism in Britain, which is Islamist terrorism and Islamist extremism. And they're going to quite comical lengths, ever more comical lengths, to deny this. And, you know, it's a reflex action on the left to say that anyone who doesn't agree with the left-wing position is right-wing. And it's axiomatic I'm afraid, not just on the left in general, but in this government in particular, to stigmatise and vilify anybody who calls attention to the problems of Islamisation, the problems of misdeeds in the Muslim community. It vilifies people like that automatically as racists and Islamophobes in order to shut down the argument.
I mean, we should say, Melanie, that the government, Labour government, have rejected some of the recommendations from this Home Office report document that, remember, came up after the Southport atrocities. That's why, personally, I find the description of the rape gangs, which this document refers to as the alleged grooming gang scandal, I find that particularly troubling. But look, just to play devil's advocate for a second here, I mean, you know, there are people within probably Riku and the state who would say, well, hang on a minute, we've had the tragic murder of Joe Cox. We have had far-right groups, you know, on the street. We have had a number of individuals arrested, sort of lone wolf-style extremists, and we do need to be sensitive to the whipping up of anti-Muslim hatred. I mean, what would you say to those voices, particularly given that, you know, you yourself were mentioned within some of these documents, a sort of mainstream conservative voice named as somebody that might sort of enable, in their minds, extremism?
I think one has to be extremely careful not to generalize. I go to great lengths all the time, wherever I can, to say that the majority of Muslims in Britain are signed up to Western values and pose no threat to anybody. But at the same time, the proportion in that community who do pose a very serious threat to the country is completely unacceptable and unlivable with, quite frankly. And so it's a question of balance, really. You know, you're right to say that the government has rejected the conclusions of this particular report. But nevertheless, there is an instinct still to stigmatise anybody who calls attention to these problems. And that serves no one's purpose.
Thank you, Melanie Phillips. Now, Patrick O'Flynn, if I can bring you in. I mean, Melanie is right to say that this is really stigmatising alternative viewpoints. We have, I think, from the last estimate, around 40,000 extremist jihadis in the country. But yet, you know, in the aftermath of Southport and other such incidents, we find ourselves, even during the rape gang discussion, Keir Starmer is saying, well, let's talk about the far right.
Well, I think the Home Office has been captured, possibly more than any other government department, by, you know, it has a major Muslim network. It has, I think, a huge influx of kind of woke, recent graduates from universities who have metropolitan ideas, live in London. I think it's not so very long ago that they produced a report for Priti Patel as Home Secretary on these rape gangs, and they claimed there wasn't enough data to be sure one way or the other.
Yeah, which was absurd, given the independent
totally
reports.
Bending over backwards not to state the obvious. And I'm afraid the Home Office needs absolutely massive radical change, and for them to be smearing distinguished commentators like Melanie Phillips is a total disgrace.
Scarlett, the Home Office has been captured.
Well, actually, I'm trying to think when it was, but certainly in the last 18 months. I mean, certainly when we had a Conservative government, and there was a list of things that, you know, made you a far left extremist to be worried about, including really ridiculous things like, you know, a socialist, a thing. I mean, you know, are there children
two-tier
far left?
policing? Do you think two-tier policing makes you complaining about that makes you a far-right extremist?
No, that what I'm saying is I think that there are people in the Home Office who just have no idea about real life, right?
Wow.
And thank goodness that the government has completely rejected this. I mean, one had to get the Labour Party to put in a complaint about the other one for then, I've forgotten who was Home Secretary at the time, person who came after Suella, James Cleverly, to reject it. I mean, the problem is that there is a real problem with extremism, and it isn't whether you read Melanie Phillips or whether you're a socialist or whether you're a Muslim, actually. There is a problem about people, you know, people who want to be terrorists.
So the Home Office is completely out of touch with the real world. Scarlett, I'm shocked. We agree. We actually agree on something. I never thought I'd see the day. Thank you, Scarlett, Patrick, and thank you to Melanie Phillips, of course. Do check out her work, including her new book, which is coming out shortly. In a moment, we will be looking at Labour's supposed plan to save the economy with a top economist who might just be a little bit sceptical. See you in a few minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Looking ahead to tomorrow and across southern parts of Europe, there's quite a mixed picture. There is still some rain and even a bit of hill snow around, especially across northern parts of Spain into southern France. Elsewhere across Spain and Portugal, it's actually a bit drier and brighter than it has been recently, and similar across much of Italy for now, although there is some rain around and rain affecting Greece as well. There will be some further dry, bright weather to come as we go through into the weekend, with temperatures around or a touch above average for the time of year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. It's going to be a bit chilly for many of us overnight, and with that there is the risk of some icy patches developing, especially towards the north. Meanwhile, further south, we're still under the influence of an area of low pressure which is just off the coast of France, but it is bringing some heavy rain to immediate southern coastal parts, particularly towards the southeast. A lot of that is clearing away though as we go overnight, and so for many it's going to be a dry picture with some clear skies, but worth noting across Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, we are going to have some showers feeding in from the north, and with temperatures falling close to, if not a little bit below freezing, particularly in rural spots, that brings the risk of some frost and also some icy patches. The icy patches are going to be more of an issue across parts of northern Scotland where the showers are more frequent, and worth bearing in mind these showers could bring some sleet or snow, particularly over any modest higher ground. Also some icy patches likely across parts of Northern Ireland too, especially towards the north where we have some showers feeding in. A few showers perhaps for northwest England and also around northern and western parts of Wales, but otherwise, once that rain in the southeast has cleared through, it is looking largely dry as we go through into tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, again, lots of fine weather on offer, plenty of sunshine, just a few showers to watch out for, particularly towards some northern and western coastal areas, but most places avoiding these. And yes, just a bit of cloud bubbling up through the afternoon, but generally a fine and often sunny picture. That being said, temperatures around average for the time of year, so still a bit of a chilly feel to things. Later on, we will have a system coming in from the west that's going to push through overnight into Friday and lying across southeastern parts as we go through Friday itself. Behind that, though, a lot of dry weather following in, but it does look a bit cloudier than tomorrow, and so sunshine's going to be at a bit more of a premium. Into the weekend, and there will be a northwest-southeast split, with northwestern parts seeing most of the wet and windy weather.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation Tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called for an economic revolution today, claiming to take inspiration from Margaret Thatcher, of all people, in his supposed pursuit of cutting regulations to maximise growth. But some of you may remember it was only last month that Keir Starmer asked the regulators for ideas of how to grow the economy. But the regulators are the groups that are the main obstacles to growth. So does he really know what he's talking about when it comes to regulation and growth? I'm joined now by the economist and fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy, Catherine McBride, as well as my panel, columnist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Catherine, does Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, we should say, do they know what they're talking about when it comes to regulation and growth?
Certainly not regulation and probably not growth either, because they've announced some really good things. Some of the infrastructure they're talking about are great because we've been talking about them all for 20 years.
Right.
You know, the third runway for Heathrow, the Oxford-Cambridge corridor, the new dams, including the reservoir at the Abingdon Reservoir at Oxford. And I'm sure the Liberal Democrats are already lying in front of the bulldozers there. And I'm sure, actually, I know that Sir Mayor Khan is now lying in front of the bulldozers in Heathrow. And, you know, there'll be just as many people probably trying to block the Oxford-Cambridge corridor. I'm not sure why, but or who they'll be. They're planning on increasing the Heathrow runway when if they really want the Oxford-Cambridge area to become an AI, artificial intelligence sort of hot point for Europe. And Europe is an area that has pretty much prevented all new technology and AI happening through regulation. But apparently we're going to be the base for Europe. And yet the two airports in that little area, Luton and Stansted, do not fly to the US.
Right.
There are no direct flights.
But if we
so
could just...
why are we going to expand Heathrow? If you really want that area to grow, get Luton flying direct to San Francisco and Texas, you know.
But if we could just step out for a minute in terms of the wider growth story here. So we probably, I would suggest, we're probably already in recession. You know, we're certainly in, you know, very, very low levels of growth. We've got very expensive debt, lots of debt. We don't really have any sort of ambition in Westminster to reconfigure the state, to try and help business. We've got more taxes coming down on businesses. We read this week that businesses are cutting jobs at the fastest rate since the financial crash. Does this government actually have a broader plan for growth? Or is it actually just going from one little tinkering project to another? I mean, what is the big growth story here in the UK for the next 5-10 years?
No, nothing for the next 5-10 years. Most of this infrastructure will take years to build and probably, because this is the UK, will be way over budget.
Right.
The taxes they've increased on businesses, the national insurance, which is going up in April, it's starting at £5,000, which is a very, very minimal wage, which is extraordinary. So employers will have to pay 15% national insurance on someone who's really just working there a few hours, you know, part-time. They're also putting up other business costs. They're putting up, if you try and sell your business, you'll get hit for capital gains tax. If you die, you'll get hit with inheritance tax if you're a small family business. They are doing everything they can to make it more and more uninteresting for people to set up a business here. And then, final point, she also increased the taxes on oil and gas. And just at a point when the US has decided that they have to lower the cost of energy to really, really kill Putin's source of money, the UK has stopped our own drilling.
Scarlett, this is a government that is increasingly looking fundamentally out of touch with business, with what business needs to thrive, to generate growth, to generate prosperity.
No, so I think one of the things that Catherine was saying is that finally an awful lot of decisions that have taken 20 years to not being made are being made, right? Is that we've been messing around with the Heathrow, whether to have...
But we're not going to see this for decades.
No, but the point is that what business want is certainty. What they don't want is, well, we might do it, we might not. We might have this corridor and we might not. So actually that's really, really important. And one feels that finally the aircraft carrier that is Britain, it's finally turning around. So the IMF has given us a good forecast. PwC has given a good forecast. I mean, so what we've got to see is what will happen. And the thing about it is Nobody knows. I mean, you know, economists get it wrong over and over again. It was the Queen who said to the economists, why didn't you see the crash coming?
It's all fine, Patrick. Everything's going great.
Bit Panglossian. I think they're flailing and failing. And all we got today from Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer were buzzwords, sloganising and cover stories. And the reality, the main things that have happened since Labour got hold of the economy, a massive jobs tax, a massive crashing of economic sentiment via blowing up this idea of the huge black hole in the national finances, followed by a big spending budget, not just a big taxing budget. And now we have, as Kemi Badenoch raised today, an employment bill which is going to make it both more expensive and more perilous to hire people. And Keir Starmer sort of said to the Tories, you ran scare stories about the minimum wage. But the difference is the minimum wage came in better economic times to bring in new employment regulation, new risks, day one employment tribunal rights, cutting the notice required for a strike, several measures which are not only going to cost business extra money in a regulatory sense, but are also just simply going to make it scary to give people jobs.
After the national insurance rise too.
And that on top of the national insurance rise, on top of crashing economic sentiment, on top of their ludicrous energy policies, this is the reality. I think that there's always a time lag with economic things, and I think a recession, unfortunately, is now baked in, and they'll be doing well to get out of it this year.
I mean, Catherine, there is something strange going on in that, you know, Rachel Reeves came in and it was all very gloomy and pessimistic and business confidence collapsed. Now this week we're hearing from Rachel from accounts that actually the story is now positive and she wants people to believe in the economy. And I'm sort of reading the headlines thinking, well, hang on a minute, you've just put in national insurance tax rises, you've got these new labour laws, which business is going to think, I've got another thing I've got to process and work through. Is it just me? She looks like she's out of her depth. That's my impression.
They are definitely out of their depth, but they're also trying to please both sides of the story. Because as you were saying, these things were actually approved years ago, but they were blocked by activists and legal lawfare, as they call it, and the Labour Party. Keir Starmer voted against the third runway at Heathrow. You know, now he's standing behind Rachel saying, yeah. But even in the things they're talking about, like the trade, they are saying that Jonathan Reynolds is going to go to India and do the trade deal, and they are saying they're going to get closer to Europe. Right. Those two things don't exist.
I mean, there is a strategic dilemma here, isn't there, in that, I mean, Europe is... it is declining as a share of the global economy. There is a sort of, you know, more opportunity with, you know, America and, you know, Asia and so on. But Labour doesn't seem to know which direction is heading in.
I don't understand why you have to make a choice. I mean, of course, you know, France, Europe is just across there, and of course we should be trading with them. More
regulation, more protectionism.
But we
do trade with them.
I know, and we need to trade with them more and better, and we need to have a much better Brexit deal. And of course we want to trade with India. I mean, we want to trade with the world. We want to be open to the world. I don't think there is a choice between Europe and India. I think one can do both.
Well, I hope so. But there is also the choice between the net zero plans and the growth agenda.
Yeah.
Because that also they don't work together.
Yeah, and are they really compatible? Well, the debate is going to carry on. Obviously, thank you to Catherine and to my panel. Now, in a moment, I'm going to be speaking to a man who has revealed the sheer scale of taxpayer money that is going into globalist institutions. The number is absolutely mind-boggling. Come back in a couple of minutes. I'm going to tell you all about it.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Well, specialist from Woolley and Wallace Auction House, Alexandra Aguilar, joins me now. Alexandra, how lovely to see you. And I wonder whether you were going to bring the jewellery in. You're actually wearing the jewellery. So shall we begin with the bracelet?
Right, so it's a diamond line bracelet, as you can see. It's really a beautiful thing. It's made of 27 diamonds with a yellow tint, and they are mounted on yellow gold, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. But there's more to it, and as you mentioned, it's the provenance. It comes from the collection of Elizabeth Taylor, really one of the queens of Hollywood, and it was given to her by Michael Jackson.
Have you any idea why Michael Jackson gave her such a magnificent gift.
They were very, very good friends. They were friends for over 20 years, and he knew her love for diamonds, for jewelry, and we know that they exchanged many presents, including this fantastic bracelet.
Would that have been made new at that time?
Yes, I believe so.
We're talking, what, about the 1970s or something like that?
Or maybe a little bit later.
Later 80s?
Yes, that's right. But what's particularly interesting about this one is all the 27 diamonds have the same color. And it's very difficult to find stones with the same color, with the same yellow tint. So it makes it particularly beautiful and particularly special.
Why do you think it will go for about £70,000?
It's... well, it is a beautiful piece. It's very wearable, as you can see, and there is the provenance is amazing. Jewelry from the collection of Elizabeth Taylor is very sought after, of course.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, it's been revealed that Sir Keir Starmer's government is going to pour hundreds of millions of pounds of your money into the China-sympathising World Health Organization. It seems that Labour has forgotten how disastrously the WHO handled the COVID pandemic. But this move raises broader questions that I want to talk about tonight, namely how much of your money is being wasted on these globalist institutions. Now, my next guest has revealed a fascinating number, a staggering number. I mean, this number is so big, it's hard to make sense of, but suggests that £85 billion of your money, 85 billion, has been poured into globalist organisations since 2009, since the financial crisis, with another £7.5 billion per year lined up until the year 2027, including the IMF and the World Bank. Who cares about the NHS crisis? Who cares about the social care crisis? Who cares about the immigration crisis? But this funding could actually be used for a 1% tax cut to you on the basic rate, giving you more of your money. Now, I'm joined by Media Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, William Yarwood, to discuss this. William, I saw your thread on X and I thought these numbers can't be right. £86 billion since 2009. I mean, the number's so big, you say billion, but 86 billion. I mean, where's the money gone?
Where's the money gone? Well, first of all, Matthew, thanks for having me on the show the evening. And this is all part of research we at the Taxpayers Alliance did just a few years ago. We ran a campaign called Global Quangos Uncovered, where we did a lot of research into things like the IMF, the World Bank, the World Health Organization. Right. And like you said, the figures we found were quite stunning. If I could just break down a few of the numbers for you. The World Health Organization was receiving around £168 million of taxpayers' cash in 2022 alone. The World Bank received over £1.5 billion of taxpayers' cash in 2022. The IMF received about £2.1 billion. And that's not to mention places like the COP, which is obviously the UN Climate Summit, where ministers jet set to that conference every single year, costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of pounds, with actually the former disgraced Scottish Minister Humza Yousaf billing taxpayers over £100,000 for a 6-day gig at that conference. So it's costing taxpayers millions, billions of pounds, and quite frankly, this money could be better spent at home on tax cuts, on our NHS and a variety of other issues.
I have often made the argument that when you look at things like foreign aid, 15 billion that we spend every year on foreign aid, 15.5 billion, but we're treating British people in hospital corridors, hospital car parks. We have people dying in the National Health Service, not able to have a private room, surrounded by their loved ones, you know, crowded corridors, but we're sending all this money elsewhere. And what you're saying is we're also sending it to these quangos, these quasi non-governmental organisations that aren't accountable to voters. Now, just explain to me, like I don't know anything about these things. Where is this money going? What is it being spent on? Why are we giving the IMF billions? Why are we giving the World Bank billions? What are they spending it on?
Sure. So there's a variety of things here. When it comes to, for example, the World Bank, a lot of that goes towards their climate finance. What the World Bank does is, ever since they've been set up, they've actually moved towards being obsessed with net zero zealotry, mainly actually in the developing world, because of course the thing the developing world needs most is solar farms and wind farms rather than natural, you know, running water and working roads. And a lot of that money from the World Bank actually completely disappeared. Oxfam found out that $41 billion of that money has just disappeared into thin air on climate projects, unaccounted for. There's been no billing, there's been no details about it because they've got awful public records. So it's going into net zero zealotry into the World Bank, which they
so this is corruption.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of it is, Matthew. Indeed, when it comes to the IMF, it goes to things such as their business confidence index, which the IMF actually changed, although they deny it. Of course, they changed it to give China a more favourable rating in 2022. When it comes to the World Health Organization, we actually just gave them a lump sum so that they can do whatever they like with it.
Well, here's a game I play when I can't sleep. I imagine that I've been made Prime Minister and I can do whatever the hell I want to do. Now, if I was to follow Donald Trump's line, I would say, OK, an immediate pause on all spending on supranational quangos that are not accountable to voters. Now, if we were to do something like that, per year, how much would that sort of save us in cash?
Well, in terms of, as you mentioned earlier, about $7.5 billion, I think it would be around that, although obviously those figures are from a few years ago, so the figure is likely to be a little higher. As we've seen just recently, the World Health Organization is getting an extra $310 million over the next 4 years. So obviously you add those figures in. If you say don't send ministers to the climate conference at the UN, you save a couple of thousand when it comes to saving on travel and actually indeed on air emissions, which they supposedly care about.
So 7.5, let's say 7.5 to 10 billion a year. Now, we just smashed British pensioners in this country to say $1.5 billion. So let's actually say we're not going to send money to these international quangos. We're not going to fund these swanky conferences and these private jets. And look, in my earlier life as an academic, I went to a couple of these events. And I mean, it's obscene, actually, what happens at these things, champagne, etc., etc. What we could do is let's bring some of that money back here. You know, I like to say, let's fix Britain first before we spend money elsewhere. Well, why can't we start doing this? I mean, what would it take for, say, a party at the next election to put into its manifesto, OK, we're going to have an immediate pause on NGO, international quango funding. We're going to bring that money back home. Would we be breaking laws if we did that, or could we actually just make that decision?
So the issue is to do with foreign aid specifically. So a lot of this global quango money gets funneled through our foreign aid budget, and we have a legal obligation from 2015 to spend about 0.7% on foreign aid. So I just repeal that immediately. I just repeal that immediately.
Yeah, sorry, we've got to fix the NHS and social care.
Absolutely. And also when it comes to foreign aid more broadly, I mean, you mentioned how pensioners have been slammed. Let's talk about farmers for a second. We at the TPA found that foreign farms via foreign aid funding are getting over £500 million a year just on a handful of projects. All the while, Rachel Reeves is slamming farmers with the new family farms tax. And how much they're going to raise? About £500 million. So actually that funding needs to be cut, and actually British farmers need to be put first. So, but on a more deeper point, if I may, Matthew, it would take a lot of spine from our political class to do that, which I don't think they have. And I think actually when it comes to the global quangocracy and the funding of the global quangocracy, there's an element to which it's actually part of our political elite's governing philosophy. It's to appease international bureaucrats. It's to appeal people on the world stage. Keir Starmer loves this. I mean, look at the amount of trips Keir Starmer's taken since he's become Prime Minister. So, to be honest with you, our current Prime Minister is not going to do this, but any future leader, whether it's in the Tories or Reform or other parties, needs to be bold on this. And actually, I think it would be a highly popular policy to say, actually, we're going to pause foreign aid funding and we're going to put farmers, pensioners, the National Health Care Service, low taxes first.
Well, thank you, William. I was struck by polling this week which showed that I think 64% of Brits said they would like to reduce foreign aid spending. And I imagine the number would be even higher if we said, let's reduce that to spend it on the National Health Service. Now, here's Patrick Christis to tell us what's coming up after this show.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Great show. Two Labour cabinet ministers are at each other's throats tonight. I'm going to reveal the inside story. We've got a Sudanese serial sex attacker that we are refusing to deport. NHS bosses defied the government and hired a load of diversity officers anyway. Should we just sack them? And girls have been banned from playing football because they asked if they were playing against men, and it turned out they were.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, I did see that NHS story today, and I thought, this is remarkable. How are we spending all this money on diversity officers, but we're treating people in hospital corridors? Bananas. Exactly. Looking forward to it, Patrick. Thank you for joining us tonight. State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. We'll see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m, right here. Thanks for watching.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. It's going to be a bit chilly for many of us overnight, and with that, there is the risk of some icy patches developing, especially towards the north. Meanwhile, further south, we're still under the influence of an area of low pressure, which is just off the coast of France, but it is bringing some heavy rain to immediate southern coastal parts, particularly towards the southeast. A lot of that is clearing away, though, as we go overnight, and so for many, it's going to be a dry picture with some clear skies, but worth noting across Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, we are going to have some showers feeding in from the north, and with temperatures falling close to, if not a little bit below freezing, particularly in rural spots, that brings the risk of some frost and also some icy patches. The icy patches are going to be more of an issue across parts of northern Scotland, where the showers are more frequent, and worth bearing in mind these showers could bring some sleet or snow, particularly over any modest higher ground. Also some icy patches likely across parts of Northern Ireland too, especially towards the north, where we have some showers feeding in. A few showers perhaps for northwest England and also around northern and western parts of Wales, but otherwise, once that rain in the southeast has cleared through, it is looking largely dry as we go through into tomorrow morning. Then through tomorrow itself, again, lots of fine weather on offer, plenty of sunshine, just a few showers to watch out for, particularly towards some northern and western coastal areas, but most places avoiding these. And yes, just a bit of cloud bubbling up through the afternoon, but generally a fine and often sunny picture. That being said, temperatures around average for the time of year, so still a bit of a chilly feel to things. Later on, we will have a system coming in from the west that's going to push through overnight into Friday and lying across southeastern parts as we go through Friday itself. Behind that, though, a lot of dry weather following in, but it does look a bit cloudier than tomorrow, and so sunshine's going to be at a bit more of a premium. Into the weekend, and there will be a northwest-southeast split, with northwestern parts seeing most of the wet and windy weather.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232.